Okay, I'm gonna get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our, I guess, the final talk of the Hillary term for Quantum Information Society. We are hosting Zeki here today. He's actually, I guess, a old friend of mine. I guess 3-4 years now, and he is. He's the founder of Q Turkey. He used to lead Q Turkey. He passed along his role now. And we did many events together. He also hosted many events. It's a privilege to host him now on my side. I mean, there are many things to say about him. And Benji and Leah from our committee are leading this event today. So I'll pass along the introduction to them. Just to give a recap of what we do events with influential speakers like Zeki in quantum information and quantum computing. And this is actually the final event for our current committee. And I'm also going to pass along the role as president. So we will elect a new president in a few weeks. And we are open to new committee positions. So please reach out to us if you want to be a part of the next committee, which is going to start next term. And we're looking forward to hearing from everyone. But thanks for joining today. And I'll pass along to Benji and Leah.
Great. Thanks so much, Mert, for the introduction to the introduction. So yeah, a very warm welcome to everyone. I'm glad to see we have so many people here from all over the world, and for those of you who are in Oxford during the vacation. So yes, this is our last event as the Quantum Information Society for this committee or this year. So yes, please feel free to get in touch with any committee members if you're excited about helping to shape the society for next year. We've also sent out an email with a form if you'd like to fill that out as well. So yes, one of the perks of being on the committee is that you get to meet a lot of interesting people from Oxford and also interesting guests from outside of Oxford. So speaking of very interesting and amazing guests, today we have Zeki Seskir from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. Zeki is a PhD researcher and the coordinator of Project QTech, Quantum Technology Innovations for Society. And he conducts research into the emerging innovation and governance ecosystems of quantum technology and their ethical and societal future impacts. And today he'll be talking to us about democratization of quantum technologies. Really excited, we all are, to hear from Zeki, as we've seen what can happen in some other fields as well, where arguably democratization has not been so successful, not naming those fields. So yes, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or probably post your question in the chat and we'll get to them. And with that, the floor is yours, Zeki.
Thank you, Benji. And I'm turning on the sound of my laptop, so let's see. Okay, and the slides should be changing. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you to all those participants that are joining online. And as well introduced, I'm Zeki. I'm currently a PhD researcher at Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, Institute for Technology Assessment and Systems Analysis. And today I will talk about our paper, Democratization of Quantum Technologies, but also I will, so this paper was written with Steven Umbrello and Peter Famas from TU Delft, and Christopher Koenen is my group leader at ETAS. If you have any questions or feedback or comments regarding the presentation or the paper, you can reach out to me or Steven through the email addresses that you see on the slide. And the outline for today's talk is basically, to be complete, I will talk about quantum technologies at first, but I suspect everybody here and online knows about quantum technology, so I will be brief about that. Some really, just again, brief background information on the paper. I will talk about theories of democracy that we utilized in the paper and for the work in different value contexts. A call for responsible quantum technologies. This is not part of the paper, but I think it would be a good way to discuss with some of you that are here and online today. I will later talk about the three narratives and counter narratives that we explored in the paper, some discussion and conclusion, and finally some shameless self-advertisement. So quantum technologies, as almost all of you know, it is a kind of an emerging field. There are four main pillars in the European framework: quantum communication, quantum computation, quantum simulation, and quantum sensing and metrology. They are all based on the basic science, which is sometimes referred to as quantum science or quantum information science. This is the European framework. In the US framework, there are three pillars. So computation and simulation are combined. And of course, there are engineering, control, software theory, and education training, which are horizontal aspects to these technologies. And why are we talking about quantum technologies or the second quantum revolution? When you check the number of papers and the number of patents, you can see there has been some quite an uptake in the last 2 decades, and especially since basically last 6 to 10 years. And similarly, if you check the number of startups, you can see, so the graph here refers to the number of new startups per year in quantum technologies. And since the data collection ended around 2022, you can see here that we didn't capture all, but there's clearly a trend of going upwards in the number of new startups being founded. And these startups are kind of equally distributed among certain regions of the world. Well, let's say US, EU, and UK, Canada, and Australia. And in terms of public investment, there has been a lot going on in the last, since 2015. And just, very recently, UK also announced additional 2.5 billion pounds to be invested in quantum technologies in the following 10 years. And of course, the topic has been making headlines from time to time in the last 10 years in Time, Science, Nature, and all those journals that are kind of relevant to our fields. And finally, of course, the Nobel Prize in 2022, which kind of excited, but also validated the importance of the field for many. Therefore, at least in Europe, a lot of people believe that the future is quantum. And so we kind of recently published a paper in Quantum Science and Technology, IOP. You can check it out. It is a collaboration between KIT and TU Delft. And we really hope that you read the paper, hopefully cite the paper, and just send us your feedback. Now, in the next approximately 5 minutes, I will talk about the theories of democracy in different value contexts. We use 3 main theories of democracy, but we know that there are more. We only focused on these 3 because they're kind of the mainstream ones. The deliberative, participatory, and representative democracy. And we also explored democracy as an instrumental versus intrinsic value. And I will discuss what these mean. And the 3 narratives that we identified and the counter narratives that we kind of tried to produce were on quantum technologies as an arena for geopolitics, quantum mechanics as incomprehensible, and quantum computing as a threat. Of course, these are not the only narratives in the field, but we believe that these 3 are kind of major narratives that have some hold in the field, in the community, and also create some obstacles in proper democratization of these technologies. So what we mean when we are talking about different theories of democracy, like deliberative, participatory, and representative, we try to identify, or let's say differentiate them with respect to the number of participants, type of participation, and participant selection methods. So one thing to note here is when we talk about democracy, we are not specifically referring to the governmental regime or the electoral system that is democracy. We are talking about a more general concept of selection of participation, stakeholdership, and practically a decision-making process. And you can check these in the paper. To be quick, I will just pass. And when we say value context, we practically differentiated between instrumental and intrinsic values. What this means that you can be doing something very similar in both value context. Let's say that you can be including stakeholders to the technology development process, but this might be due to two very different reasons. For example, it can be to support the technology development and or technology adoption, if you are doing this for an instrumental point of view. But it can be for betterment of the deliberation process on the technology if you are doing it via taking democracy as an intrinsic value. And we kind of discussed several examples. Of course, these are not exhaustive. You can find many other type of comparisons. But the argument we kind of proposed here is, let's say that you are a company, you are doing some democratization work. You don't have to do it for democracy's sake. You can be doing it for an instrumental sake. You can be for open access to expand your user base, and then you can still be doing democratization in the process. And let's move to the three narratives. The first narrative, as you might remember, was quantum technologies as an arena for geopolitics. And why? Well, one reason is quantum technologies has some military applications, and there has been rising tensions between different regions of the world. But this is not only related to military applications. Still, the narrative is there's an arms race. There's a race, it's on arms, and we need to kind of weaponize quantum technologies in a way. And this, this picture is rather funny, because what they did is they just put the word quantum in front of everything, like quantum cyber warfare, quantum inertial navigation, quantum underwater warfare, so quantum everything. And of course, there are some truth to these arguments, like quantum radar can, in theory, sense stealth planes, which means there can be some strong advantage gained from that. But still, this narrative is a very dominant one in the field. And the second narrative that we explored was basically this one, starting from this quote, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. You can find this quote in varying background pictures, varying settings, in different fonts. And if you do a Google search on it, you can find different iterations of it in 22 million search results. And it's kind of a strong quote, and it's kind of an enticing quote. But why? Why people think that we don't understand quantum mechanics? Well, there are some issues with the foundations of quantum mechanics. For example, there's the measurement problem, but some argue that there's no measurement problem. The famous catchphrase "shut up and calculate" has been thrown around in many contexts, and of course there are some ideas like the Penrose's hammer of conjecture that our consciousness is affected by quantum effects. And the final narrative that we explored is quantum computing as a threat. You can see these kind of headlines like organizations should make these changes to protect against quantum computing threat. For some reason, people focus on the Chinese threat. Also that can be an American threat or the European threat. And even IBM argues that there is an existential threat to data encryption and basically the infrastructure of the internet. And again, why is this a topic of discussion? Because there can be a kind of a quantum apocalypse in 1 or let's say 2 decades or 3 decades. But the argument here is it is a kind of strong narrative that is circulating around in news, but also in funding schemes and policy papers. Actually, what you can do is you can check these kind of reports on basically this study is done by the Quantum Threat Institute, the Global Quantum Threat Report, and you can see that at least for the next 15 years, the expected likelihood that such a quantum computer will exist is rather low, but still it is a very strong narrative that is circulating out. And I will come back to these 3 narratives and the counter narratives that we want to explore. But first, I want to diverge a little bit, some digression into what is responsible technologies or what is responsible quantum technologies. So one discussion here is a semantic one. Is it ethics or responsibility? And well, you can argue for either way. But I think in the end, it doesn't really matter that much. It matters what you intend to, and that is trying to develop these technologies in a manner that is societally not very harmful, but more beneficial. I will talk very briefly about responsible technology development, what we mean by that. And I mean, Caroline is also joining us online, so this will be just a very caricature version of what we mean by responsible technology development. Maybe she can later chime in and say something. Does it really make a difference? All these responsibility discussions. And I will talk a little bit about path dependencies and 2 examples from the Qt field. So this slide is from one of our doctorand modules. So from our courses, there are practically 2 extremes when we are talking about innovation. The technology enthusiast kind of an approach is, well, let's develop it, let's test it in the field, and if there are some problems, we will manage with them later. And on the other hand, there is more, here it says environmentalist, but let's say risk-averse kind of an approach that practically says that any innovation should only be introduced to the market if and only if no potential damage is known or they are all mitigated. And responsible technology development falls somewhere in between. It's practically acknowledges potential advantages, but also possible threats and risks, and calls for doing a ritual, basically saying that we should develop these technologies, but also be careful about how we develop these technologies. And does it really make a difference? Talking about this, shouldn't be just develop the technologies and deal with the consequences later. One example I would like to give is the seatbelts. When you get into a car, seatbelts right now are there. They are very ubiquitous. We don't even think about cars without any seatbelts. But the first vehicle on the streets of UK was introduced in 1894, but the seatbelts came into force only in 1983. And one argument might be, oh, there wasn't enough cars on the streets, but here you can see that in 1970s, more than half of the households in England owned a car, or at least one car. So why? And in 1983, it wasn't a very easy peasy kind of a legislation. It was opposed by both the conservative government and the labor official opposition. And one reason that this happened is the concept of path dependency. People actually don't want to change the way they do things, and industry also don't want to change the way they do things. And these are not always due to some nefarious reasons. Just think about the keyboards that we use, the QWERTI or the QWERTY kind of keyboards. The reason these keyboards are rather common is initially during the typewriters, the mechanical ones, these letters were not rather widely used or commonly used, or let's say frequently used. So if you arrange them in a way, this reduced the jamming probability of using these typewriters rather quickly. But now our keyboards, they don't have such mechanical pieces. So why are we still using them? It's not very efficient. And let's just not talk about our keyboards. Our phones have keyboards on them as well. And we are still using QWERTY. And the reason is practically path dependence. It's really, really hard to change the design or the way it is after it is introduced. And one, again, really good example for this is the trains versus the horse-drawn wagons versus all the way to the road design in the Roman times. So the reason the size of our trains are set in a certain length right now is the way the Romans designed their roads 2000 years ago. And one lesson that we can learn from this discussion is the energy consumption of quantum technologies or quantum computers, to be particular regarding that. So there is this initiative called Quantum Energy Initiative, and they have this manifesto. You can check their website, and they kind of call for this energy-based metrics for quantum technologies and provide methodologies to measure them. Because when you think about it, right now, we are trying to make these devices into existence, to scale them up, to make them useful. But we don't really care about their energy consumption that much. And one approach to this might be, it's already really, really hard to create these devices. So what we can do is we can create them first and then worry about their energy efficiency. But path dependency is a real thing. If you don't focus it on now, in the future, it will become much more expensive in terms of your labor, the monetary cost, and even the public opinion. And by public opinion, I mean you need to convince a lot of people to change the entire design of these devices. And the second example is the Quantum Ethics Project. I will just read this from their website. So they do a lot of stuff, but one of their main focus is education. So they say that we believe there is currently a unique opportunity in front of us. Hundreds of degrees specializing in quantum computing are being created worldwide. We want to make sure critical thinking on the socio-ethical impact of quantum technology is part of the core skill set taught to the future quantum workforce from the very start. Concretely, we are creating modular teaching resources that can be integrated into programs at high school, undergrad, and graduate level. And they're kind of right, because when you check the number of master's degrees around the world, you can see the number is not really that high. It's something like 30. But if you check the number of new degrees being created right now, it is almost more than 30. So the number of master's program and PhD programs that are created on quantum technologies right now is probably greater than the existing number of programs that are already out there. So if you wait until tweaking with the curriculum of these programs, then it would become much harder to convince people to change their entire course structure or the program structure. So what can we learn from these practical examples? What will be the energy consumption of future error-corrected quantum computers? Will they require a nuclear power plant right next to the quantum computer to run properly? What will the future quantum engineers learn during their master's or PhD degrees? Just technical knowledge or some socio-ethical considerations as well? And the thing that we should also ask ourselves is, when is the time to discuss these? What is the appropriate venue? And who gets to discuss this and why? And I will just revert back to the narratives and counter-narratives on this, because the three narratives that we kind of explored, and I just very briefly mentioned, we think that these narratives are overemphasizing create and strengthen exclusionary practices. So overemphasizing these narratives create and or strengthen exclusionary practices. And they result in something called visionary lock-in, which means you lock into a certain future vision of a technology that might be suboptimal in a sense. It can be optimal as well, but you're just locking into that future, and you are practically discouraging stakeholders to explore other kind of future visions in this. Also, this vision can be very easily translated to design options and design choices as well. And well, visions of the future and demands of certain stakeholders are prioritized while the visions and demands from other stakeholders are suppressed. And one I think this isn't kind of an illuminating example for me, but maybe it can also be for you. Path dependencies and rushed decisions also have their associated costs. And one example from UK is the Huawei towers that decided to get rid of. Now, it is expected that this decision will cost £2 billion just to replace these towers. And, one can discuss the geopolitics and all the other stuff, but this decision that initially, resulted in the buying of these towers or the installation of these towers without considering the reasons they are removing them right now was actually kind of a rushed decision. So what we tried to discuss in the paper were these three narratives and some alternatives. Instead of circulating these quantum technologies as an arena for geopolitics, one can also circulate or discuss that the world consists of more than just hegemonic powers, and we should avoid protectionisms or maybe just even over-protectionisms. And we can focus on civilian uses related to sustainable development goals instead of just, military uses. And this doesn't mean that quantum technologies shouldn't be used for military purposes, but the emphasis on these technologies, it is up to us. We can emphasize on quantum computing for climate change versus quantum radars to see stealth planes. The argument on quantum mechanics as being incomprehensible, if you think that you understand quantum mechanics, you don't. It should only be used in a proper context and not to implicate that people can't actually understand quantum mechanics, because believe it or not, a lot of people understand quantum mechanics. There are thousands and tens of thousands of papers on it. And quantum technologies needs to become kind of a normal and even mundane technology. And the associated pseudoscience should be criticized. And the quantum computing is a threat. Well, we know that it's a threat. It has been known for a while that it's a threat, and there are some mitigation methods already, out there being implemented. And we shouldn't focus on the worst case scenarios that, in 5 years we will lose everything kind of thinking. We should present realistic timelines, and we should kind of focus on ways to constructively deal with these threats. And again, the reason I'm showing you this is there's a lot of money already going in to quantum computing and quantum technologies. And there's this kind of a joke, but not really, that there's a 5% responsibility tax. Any kind of an investment, especially if it's a public investment that you are putting in a technology, you should reserve 5% of it to develop more responsible ways to deal with the consequences or the development process of these technologies. So discussion or conclusion is, we believe that having a clear understanding of in which context the term democratization is located and used allows both developers and practitioners of policy actions a ground on which they can formulate their aims, goals, and visions. We also believe that phasing out some narratives and replacing them with some more constructive ones that focus on solutions and realistic timelines, normalization of quantum mechanics and quantum technologies is a more inclusive way to deal with narrativization of these technologies. And also regarding the discussion on open access, yes, open access is a good thing, but just providing access to either the technology or the products of it's a necessary but not a sufficient condition for democratization, because it doesn't guarantee agency. Therefore, there needs to be more stakeholder engagement and empowerment for stakeholders. And now ask for help and some advertisements. For example, there is this NATO event that also includes discussions on ethical, legal, and policy issues. So we shouldn't think that, oh, these military folks, they don't want to discuss this stuff. I think they actually do, because they also live in the society and they see the potential pitfalls that these kind of narratives and these kind of discussions can lead to. And now to some advertisements. I would very strongly recommend everyone to check the Center for Quantum and Society in Quantum Data Netherlands. It is our colleagues at TU Delft. They are part of this initiative as well. And they, on the 14th of April, they have this event, Quantum Technologies, Applications and Responsible Innovation, that you can join online or on site. It is on World Quantum Day, and for those of you that don't know what it is, the World Quantum Day is a day dedicated to promoting the public understanding of quantum science and technology around the world. So if you're interested in it, there will be many events around the world on the week of April the 14th, and you can check the website, World Quantum Day. And in Karlsruhe, we will be organizing the third iteration of the workshop series called Responsible Quantum Technologies on 27th and 28th of July. If you're interested in attending, either on site or online, just reach out to me. It's a free event, and well, thank you for your attention.
Oh, thanks very much. Okay, great. Let's all thank Zeki in the Zoom. Yeah, so thank you so much for the really interesting talk, and I think it really lines up with the sort of things that we would want to hear about, or at least the people here, members of the society want to hear about. So yes, we'll open the floor to questions or discussion now. I think, yeah, so feel free to either post your questions in the chat, or alternatively, you can raise your hand if you want to if you want to ask your question directly. And of course, probably as we go further on, we'll get into a bit of open discussion. So, okay, so we already have a question in the chat, which I think you can see, Zeki, but I'll just read it aloud for everyone as well. So, recently, the Huawei 5G technology kit has been removed, as you mentioned, due to UK government's decision. And how do you think this is going to affect 6G technology, given Huawei's patents? And yeah, how is this decision going to affect government and public securities and other factors in the future?
Thanks, Benji. Well, I think it's a good question, but we should ask this to the UK government that make this decision. I mean, this is one of the points on. It depends on what you want to optimize, and at this point, I don't think they wanted to optimize the actual technology and its benefits, but they were more on a risk aversion kind of mode, which, it depends on where you stand, kind of makes sense, or it was totally an obscene response. But yeah, and regarding the patents issue, patents are not global things. So if you have a patent in China, practically if you can't get a corresponding patent in UK, it doesn't really matter if someone in UK just commercializes what you patented. Of course, there are some conventions around the world, but if we are talking about this really polarized kind of a future scenario, then the patents are not really that kind of an important thing.
Okay, great. Great, thank you, Zeki. Okay, so I guess whilst people are thinking, I'll go ahead and ask a question. So, what do you think are what parallels can you draw between where the sort of democratization of quantum technologies, how we're studying this right now, with other fields like AI and biotech, and also what are the differences that you see in terms of the differences in the technologies or in governance or in how we should deal with it?
Thanks. Well, regarding AI and biotech, I think one main discussion or one main point related to quantum is it has been said a lot, but I will also repeat that we are kind of early this time. So we still have some time to contemplate. We are not that early compared to some of the arguments that, we are too, because there are some arguments that are we too early into these discussions, but we can learn from them. We can hopefully learn not to follow their mistakes, and we can do our own mistakes, and then the following technologies can learn from our mistakes. And for AI and biotech, I know that, for example, for biotech, one thing that at least in Netherlands they learned is this public dialogue. Because for biotech, especially for GMOs, the public dialogue practically didn't exist, and there was a strong backlash on GMOs. And so for the following technologies, they kind of initiated these public dialogues and public understanding or public acceptance of these technologies. Related to quantum technologies, I know that, for example, in UK, they did a public dialogue report. In Netherlands as well, they are doing these kind of works. So obviously we learned something from our previous mistakes, and it also depends on whether you want to call them mistakes or not, so we learned, and there are a lot of people working on currently what can we learn from AI's mistakes, or the mistakes done in the AI field. And I suspect there will be some great lessons that we get, because a lot of the discussions in AI related to ethics, fumbled terribly in this regard. For democratization, I suspect in the quantum field, there is a push for democratization. People want these technologies to be democratized. But one of the reasons we wrote this paper was, when people say, democratization, I don't think at least everybody means the same thing. And democratization is can't be done in a single way. It depends on your assumptions. It depends on the context. It depends on who is doing what. And of course, this doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, these are ill-intentioned efforts or these are just, democracy washing in a sense, but there needs to be more elaborated exploration of what is being done, what can be done, why are we doing this, who are doing this, and these kind of discussion points. I can see there is a question. I can read if you want me to.
Yes.
So the Zeki, thank you for informative talk. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the current state of cryptography, which relies on classical mathematical equations in light of the potential impact of quantum cryptography. Do you believe that the development of today's cryptographic systems is a futile effort, given the eventual wide-scale use of quantum computers? No, I think the cryptographic systems are here to stay because, I mean, as far as I know from the history of, cryptography versus cryptology, it has always been kind of a cat and mouse game. And, it's also kind of an arms race. One side develops a better, encryption algorithm. The other side develops a better decryption algorithm, or some social engineering attacks or some different types of attacks. So, and when we think about, quantum computers, they can destroy the public key infrastructure. There are also a lot of other things that can destroy public key infrastructure. Like if you nuke everywhere, you are practically destroying the public key infrastructure. So this also is not just a technological issue. It comes down to a lot of other factors as well. So I don't think, just because there will be quantum computers capable of running Shor's algorithm or similar algorithms, doesn't necessarily mean that the public key infrastructure will be done with. But there needs to be some real novel and probably innovative ways to update our infrastructure in a way. It seems to be lawmakers will have to collaborate with quantum scientists, right? So this is another question in the chat. Maybe, I think they are. I think there's already some collaboration going on. And Carolyn, I see that. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in a little bit on the point you made earlier about some sort of ethics and responsible technology approaches. So responsible technology, responsible innovation approaches are very much rooted in ethics. So they're, looking to foreground public goods and think about impacts on society. Where I might kind of distinguish them slightly is that responsible approaches kind of focus on the practical application of things like accountability, liability, but also forward-looking aspects of responsibility, like taking care. So it's about the future as well as what's happened in the past. So liability and accountability and so on tend to relate to something that's already happened, but with responsibility, we want to look forward and make sure that we as quantum scientists and the people who are shaping the technologies of the future are taking care of the future and making sure that we're doing it in the best way we can.
Thanks. Yeah, and you should all listen to Karen because she's at the Responsible Technology Institute, so she knows way more than what this means than myself. Any other questions?
Yes. Hi, Zeki. First of all, thank you so much for the talk. Really informative. I was wondering, and this is also probably in relation to one of the questions that was put in the chat, that do you see us progressing into a time where governments or even intergovernmental organizations, for example, the EU, the NATO, so on and so forth, they will start to get subject matter experts on quantum technologies as policymakers? Because, at least in my estimation, it seems to be like we're entering a world where technocrats will become more important than bureaucrats in some form, because the laws concerning these technologies will need people who have subject matter expertise to legislate better and to think better as to how should you go about designing laws that concern the development of quantum ecosystems, the application of quantum technologies from an ethical standpoint, so on and so forth. So what do you think about that?
Good question, and thanks for asking it. I kind of agree and disagree simultaneously. The reason is, so one of the narratives we explored is, quantum mechanics as, incomprehensible. And one of the reasons that I think this narrative is rather commonly used in policymaking is that the policymakers or the decision makers more generally, they can just offload responsibility by saying that there is no way that I can understand the intricacies of these technologies. So I will just leave this, not the decision making, but dealing with the results of the decisions to the experts. And in this sense, yes, the technocrats are rather important, but also they have a lot of things to juggle with, because, just because you know how a technology works doesn't mean that you know the regulatory landscape, the laws, the geopolitical situations. So, as a technology expert, you also need, if you want to take part in these decisions, you also need to learn a lot of other stuff. But the other way around is not true. The policymakers or the decision makers, they are not learning about this technology. And to be honest, they can't, because there are a lot of technologies, and quantum is not the, let's say, the largest or the elephant in the room currently is not quantum technologies. But in that sense, I agree that, technocrats have a larger role to play, but this role is not as beneficial as some might assume for the technocrats themselves. At least that's my my take on just observing some interactions between the European parliamentary folks and the people that are kind of talking. Can you share your slides with the group again? I can share the entire presentation with you.
Thank you so much, Zeki, for your talk. It was super informative. Thank you. My question is quite broad. It's about, I think you would be the best person to ask. What kind of advice would you give to other students listening to this about how to deal with ethical concerns, either on a personal or broadly about quantum technologies, for people who are students just learning and just starting to enter the field? Is there some pathways to reporting any concerns or to get involved from a more grassroots level rather than a top-down agency or a policy level?
Thanks. And yeah, this is again a very good question. And I believe we should forge these pathways ourselves as students with the help of faculty and people that are working in the field, because it is my understanding that a lot of people in the community, in the quantum community, actually care about these topics, the ethics and responsibility, but also they don't have either the background or the time to commit into these kind of discussions. And also there are a lot of other kind of factors coming into play, like the funding, because to get funding, you also need to play into this kind of some narratives that, oh, it's this, if you're in China, you have to say that, oh, the US is coming. If you're in the US, you have to say the Chinese is coming, this kind of stuff. But as students, I suspect it is kind of on us to, just create some grassroots movements and to push for these kind of policy relevant changes. And one example is the Quantum Ethics Project. it was practically created by Joan, and she just moved to her PhD. So she was a master's student when she kind of initiated this. And another one is this Quantum Information Society Club that you are running, because it is also another stakeholder group. Yeah, I think we should do it. In terms of how can we make this a policy relevant thing, we probably need to make some noise and just organize events, invite some policy folks, hope that they join, and write papers, write blog posts, make documentaries, and just be active and be visible. I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, maybe we can slowly end the event, but it's of course up to Benji and Matt.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
So any more questions, or should we close it off? One last chance. We're actually like nearly exactly on time, so this is great. Okay, well, thanks, Zeki. It's always a pleasure to do events with you. Carolyn, thanks for your input as well. And thanks for Benji and Leah. Again, we are open to committee positions. Please reach out to us. These are the final, I guess, 2 weeks to apply. So put in your application, reach out to me, Benji, Leah, anyone at the committee, or our website, our email. And thanks for everyone who's joining. We'll be back with events next term.
Thanks. And thank you again for the invitation. And have a great evening.